Some quick admin before we get on with things. On last week's episode, I said the word July instead of June when talking about Mighty No. 9's release date, although I think it's very telling that not many people spotted the goof, because I guess so many people were used to delays that indeed announcing a July release date after the game had already come out just made sense to some people, but that was an error on my part, and I do like to correct errors. As another note, some people may be interested to know what I think about the whole Orion situation that occurred between Trek Industries and Activision, and I wrote what I like to think is a very in-depth article on the matter, coming as close as I ever get to journalism. That's on thejimquisition.com if you want to do some reading, but I have a bit more of a personal quest that I am continuing today as we return to the sewage and the depths of Steam Greenlight. What is YOLO Army? You may not have heard of this self-proclaimed video game publisher with one of the tackiest names in existence, but it's becoming an important part of Steam's grimy underbelly. Let me explain what YOLO Army is in its own words. With 2 years in development, YOLO Army has become what it is today, a widespread independent game marketing and PR firm company dedicated in publishing titles and gaining the massive community attraction. YOLO Army promises several services to game developers: branding, marketing, social community boosting, game reviewing and curation, beta testing, and, most crucially, Steam Greenlight boosting. See, YOLO's clientele appears to be made up exclusively of amateur developers who are attempting to get noticed on Steam Greenlight, and this alleged company promises to get them what they want. To date, YOLO boasts that it has promoted 146 games on Greenlight and successfully greenlit 63 of them. This company, which currently has less than 300 Twitter followers and barely a shred of presence in the wider game industry, merrily states itself to be Steam's largest games distributor. And the question is, how? Well, let's part the arse cheeks and go elbow deep to look at what YOLO Army really is, not in their words, but in mine. Though it claims to be a publisher, distributor, and marketing company, in reality it's just a Steam group. You know, Steam groups, they're communities of people banding together with the same interests in mind. Now, YOLO Army, in spite of being almost unheard of outside of Steam itself, does have an impressive 67,000 plus membership. So what common interest would all these members have? Are they fans of this non-entity of an alleged company? Are they perhaps fans of the 63 games greenlit by this non-entity of an alleged company? Unlikely. It's more likely they share a common interest with most of the population. They love free stuff. YOLO Army attracts new members with constant giveaways. In fact, if you look through its litany of announcements, you'll find giveaway after giveaway for such games as Fallout 4, Shadow of Mordor, Arkham City, and a whole bunch of random keys for games you might have never heard of. Quite how YOLO has all these keys to just give away is unknown, but if I were to speculate, and it's just speculation, I'd at least say the rise in popularity of shady scumbag companies like G2A has made the acquisition of Steam keys cheaper and easier than ever. At any rate, YOLO Army has attracted a large base of Steam users by laying out constant free games as bait. And these giveaways are also how YOLO Army has been able to get so many games greenlit. Look at this announcement, for example, where the company has 20 keys for Nebula Online up for grabs and casually tosses in that if you want more free stuff, you just have to vote for 3 games on Greenlight. Cleverly, the company states after doing that it isn't influencing votes unfairly by doing this, it's merely generating additional traffic and votes, noting that it's not responsible for anybody's individual voting decision. So this company, which claims it'll be responsible for getting your product greenlit, doesn't actually claim responsibility for products getting greenlit, except, you know, it does. And has, 63 times if its own statements are to be believed. For the most part, YOLO has been careful with its wording, encouraging people to vote for games in pursuit of free stuff without explicitly saying the free stuff is directly being exchanged for votes, which is of course against Steam's terms of use. However, the group has slipped up with its latest client, a terrible game called Shooter Tactics. Developed by a bigoted Australian, Shooter Tactics has tried and failed to be greenlit several times over the course of more than a year. It has recently come into the fold of the YOLO Army and is now getting boosted, this time with a direct and blatant exchange of freebies for votes. In a post asking people to download and play Shooter Tactics, currently called Wake Up Shooter Tactics, formerly called Wake Up, formerly called Shooter Tactics Tactical Anal Insertion, formerly called Shooter Tactics, YOLO Army notes at the bottom that it has 10 free games to give away if you vote for the game and leave a comment about it. Here we see YOLO tipping its hand and showing us exactly how it gets games onto Steam. It bribes voters. And let's look at the kind of game YOLO would proudly associate itself with, shall we? Because if you thought this was a company that cared about quality or even common decency, oh, you're sorely mistaken. Shooter Tactics, a game that has failed to be greenlit multiple times for being an asset flip, a terrible looking shooter, and for appearing about as attractive as Boris Johnson fucking a beehive, is developed by an angry, hateful, homophobic Australian man who claims his critics are swimming in a sea of sexual retardation, whatever that means, and regularly refers to anybody who bashes his game as filthy queers. Though he has recently tried to hide his constant homophobic rhetoric, my own previous coverage of his behaviour, as well as curation from the ironically named Greenlight watchdog group Digital Homicides Poop Gaming, reveals an unhinged bigot who made a terrible game and can't handle it. Here's a clip of the developer himself talking about someone who criticised his game's awful maps and lazy use of stock assets.
There's nothing wrong with my maps, I just basically wanted those bought maps that I put on there as extras, as I bought them because they got a lot of assets in there and it saved me a lot of time making more than 20 maps to add an extra map on that someone else has made. I've made about 10 different maps of my own and released about 4 or 5 of them, and I've got about another 4 to come that are half finished. And here's this idiot, this little scumbag bastard.
Yeah. That's who YOLO Army proudly represents, so much so that a representative of YOLO has very recently been added as one of the game's creators. Other developers that have been boosted by YOLO include Leto, a creepy wannabe stalker and maker of incest-themed RPG Maker clones, who regularly attacks popular critics on social media in an attempt to start feuds with them, and Clace, a sensitive soul who went spare when their crap visual novel made it to Steam and started getting some negative reviews. As well as promoting the work of inherently bad people, YOLO has no qualms about the quality of the content it helps push onto Steam's front page. According to DH Poop Gaming's John144, the company is currently courting BMC, a cringeworthy pseudo-developer who has flooded Greenlight with basic Game Guru maps masquerading as games and embarrassing live-action goofs that have to be seen to be believed. In fact, I'm going to make you watch a bit of Kimulator, a game that recently, bafflingly got onto Steam Early Access. Enjoy the work of BMC Studios.
Leader, I am pretty sure he is a spy firm.
Yes, I want to be able to message. The unit state will give me so much money for him.
But we have a small problem. He is not from the United States.
Oh, I see. He is from Japan. That's not a problem. They will give me money too.
No, look.
Oh no, he is Canadian.
I will kill you like a Jew in the Holocaust, bitch.
Yeah, so if you've ever wondered how and why so much poorly made asset flipping broken glitchy crap gets onto Steam, if you've wondered how unhinged and spiteful amateur hour developers get their work on a professional storefront, well now you know one reason. A company like YOLO Army manipulating Greenlight's voting process and getting games greenlit not because people are actually interested in them, but because they want free stuff. And this, of course, goes against the very spirit of Greenlight, undermines the entire point of its existence. I know to some this won't matter because they gave up on Greenlight years back, but I was one of the few believers of Greenlight when it first became a thing. It was a way for makers of promising games to get the recognition they deserved. However, in the years since its inception, it's slowly become a breeding ground for lazy hacks, many of whom are not just unprofessional, but are actively spiteful and have become notorious among Greenlight people for flooding entire pages with their bullshit, attacking critics both big and small in a variety of insulting or threatening ways, and just being completely fucking terrible. It is Steam's very own hive of scum and villainy right now, and the scum has a patron, YOLO Army, a group that doesn't care how good your game is, or even how much of an unstable disaster you are as a developer. It knows how to get your rectum of a game greenlit, and it sure as shit won't be how it's supposed to be. I still care deeply about Steam Greenlight, which is why I started this month a little program I like to call Operation Cleanlight, because while I will still continue to shine a light on the darkest and most dismal depths of Steam Greenlight, I also want to bring some balance and lift up the good, show some good stuff. I actually have a series now called Greenlight Good Stuff, where we look at games worthy of upvotes, and people have been voting them up. We actually got a game greenlit, Just Us, called Shots Fired. That is now greenlit. It's coming to Steam because it was a quality looking game and it deserved the votes. The honest way. Not the YOLO way, the honest way. Because Steam Greenlight is filth. It is atrocious. It's diseased. It's corrupt. You can smell the corruption from here. And some of us have had enough. Places like Digital Homicide's Poop Gaming have had enough. And something must be done. We must clear the corruption. We must clear the stink, the stench. Bring a little fragrance, a little cleanliness, a little hygiene. We must purge the unclean. And burn the heretics, of course. That's why Operation Cleanlight needs a cleaner. So I will risk disease. I will risk agony, corruption, taint. I will risk all these things. Because Steam deserves better. You all deserve better. So you can just call me the Steam Cleaner, which is a play on words, and thank God for me. Note to self, when introducing games criticism vigilante alter ego, cut mouth hole in the leather plague doctor mask. Also, we need milk.
Over the last few years, China's been picking up a lot of Australian real estate and also picking up quite a few key strategic assets that Australia has. Now, China's had a lot of interest in Australia for a long time, and they've been trying to buy up as much of Australia as they can. But that's not unique to Australia. China's been doing that all across the world. Buying and building infrastructure in many countries is on the agenda of the Chinese. But one of the recent acquisitions that didn't seem to ruffle too many feathers here in Australia is purchasing Australia's largest dairy. Scott Morrison brushed it off by saying that the majority of the company was foreign owned anyway, but that foreign ownership was New Zealand, and that got through no problems and didn't seem to raise too many eyebrows. But the recent deal in Darwin, a year lease, American base sitting right next to it. But again, few paid attention that the Chinese had already bought out the Newcastle port, and that deal was a $1 billion deal, whereas the deal in Darwin was only $506 American base. Quite a few. This deal at the Darwin port by no means kept secret. It was fairly well known that this was occurring, but the Americans' reaction to it was one of total surprise and saying that they hadn't been informed. But as the response to that was to the local newspaper and everything, so this deal occurred out in the surrounding port. So it would the Chinese have to set up pretty much like those ports. Now, Americans concerned because the Darwin port is also the port that the Americans rotate their troops out of Darwin. Because as most Australians know, there's a lot of forces in Darwin. 1,000. Proximity between the China port and a joint Australian-American could cause a bit of friction. Now the that Chinese naval vessels. And I'm feeling that's out right there, because the Chinese have been trying strategic assets of Australia for a very long time. Just recently again, another acquisition the Chinese were trying to make was for Australia's largest beef and landholder, but the application was denied due to the fact that that particular land that was associated with